I'm happy to announce our next major membership-only fishing tournament, the Frostbite Frenzy. Frostbite Frenzy will run from Saturday, January 25th through Sunday, March 30th at midnight. Registration is now open and registration will run all the way through February. For the first time ever for this event, we'll be running 2 distinct divisions. We will have a largemouth specific only or mixed bag division, and we'll have a smallmouth specific division. Each winner will get $400 plus a plaque. This is on top of our really cool Big Fish award system. I am giving away $100 to the biggest largemouth caught in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and I'm going to give $100 to the biggest largemouth caught and the second biggest largemouth caught. If we're able to get over 30 plus entries into this event, I will increase the payouts down the scale for both divisions and the Big Fish Awards. You need to be a Patreon member to be a part of this event. And again, it goes from Saturday, January 25th through March 30th. This is going to be a fun event that encompasses winter and the pre-spawn when you have a chance to catch one of the biggest fish of your life. Link in the episode description. Thank you.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens. A big friend of the show. I think the first guest I ever had on the podcast, Travis Eden of Kingfisher Guide Services. Sir, how have you been? It's been a long time.
Things have been great. Things have been great, and we finally got a little bit of water here recently in the ditch, and that should make for easier moving around, especially for those jet boat guys, who've been crying the blues since middle of summer.
Is this the worst it's been when it comes to like drought duration?
Yeah, man. I would think, I haven't seen it this low for this long. I can't say that I can ever really recall in my guiding career. But it's, you have to deal with it, at least when the water's low, that, the fish should be, stacked up in some of those deeper spots and, just kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, no pun intended.
Yeah. I know like the North Fork for almost a month, maybe longer, man. It was wadeable.
Yeah.
Or raft,
yes.
But like there is no way a jet boat was doing anything.
Yeah. It gets down to a trickle, I'll say as far as a raft is concerned and rowing a raft, it's never too low. You'll scrape and grind, and you watch some of the younger guys that, maybe aren't so familiar with running a raft, getting hung up and stuck. I get hung up and stuck, but, it's, during a trip in that low water, you kind of make it a goal of, I don't want to have to get out of the boat to drag the boat off of a rock.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is, and you got to roll with the punches. Like I said, that doesn't fish any less. Anything with that low, clear water can make it tough. You got to be able to get those baits away from the boat, because any fish that sees the boat they become boat shy, and they're just do not cooperate.
How finicky do they get this time when it gets that shallow and that clear? Do you have to be able to peg a cast at 100 plus feet to get them to commit? Especially like it's a river. It's not like we can visually see the holes. So is it you have to hit that hole before you get to it?
Yeah, sometimes, in that low water, you want to have a long distance cast. That way you can cover a lot of water without, spooking a bunch of fish. But there are times where you need to have a more precise, more accurate cast into a pool. And a lot of times, like I find guys, what they end up doing is they're fishing way high up in those pools, upstream in that big eddy that those fish might be holding in. But, usually at that time, the fish are kind of all over, but they'll fish way high up in the pool when all they really need to do is just land it somewhere in the middle of it. And anything that is in that pool that is hungry is going to eat, as long as it's not spooked. Obviously can spook some fish, just by throwing a bait in there and, splatting on top of the water, which makes, water like that, makes fly fishing very tough because your line is landing on the water. I've watched in low clear water, fish just get spooked by the shadow of the line on the bottom of the river because it's like a magnifying glass, and so the line might be only that big, but on the bottom of the water, it's the river, it's showing that big, and it's got this kind of wavy shadow to it, and totally turn fish off from or just get them shy, get them spooked. That's
crazy. What kind of water temperature are you seeing right now? Now that the water has been rising, we got a little bit more water in certain places. What are we seeing right now, condition wise?
Yeah. So I think the last time I saw water temp, it was before the rain. I saw water temps in the low 40s. We had that warming trend, and so wintertime fishing, man, if you can get on any kind of a warming trend in air temperature, maybe with a lot of sun shining, bluebird skies, with the sun's just beating down on that water, over days, it will begin to warm that water temperature up. But I've also had days out on the water where we were in the middle of it, starting out, water temp was 35 degrees. It might raise up 3, 4, maybe even 5 degrees in a day. And all of a sudden, it's like, the floodgates open and we're just getting bites left and right. So yeah, I have not checked temperature here recently, today since that rain, but we're back into another cold snap. So you kind of ride that wave of those warming trends and get out and beat the water. They're there. Jerk baits, I've had days where last Sunday we were out, had a client out, and jerk baits were the bait. Now, however, the wind was blowing, and it was blowing pretty fast, pretty hard. And I think air temp got up to like maybe the mid 40s, but with that wind blowing, it did not feel, the real feel was probably low 40s, maybe even high 30s. And with that wind blowing, any kind of jig that you were fishing, unless it was heavy, we were getting blown all over the place. I had moments even with a heavier jig on where I'm holding the line, trying to hold that slack line, and big gust of wind comes along and it literally blows the rod, and like you're not feeling anything. You're putting a bunch of slack in the line, and fish could pick it up, mumble it around in their mouth, and spit it out by the time you get set back up.
That's crazy. Yeah,
but jerk baits ended up being a thing. It's hard jerk baits for the sole fact that you're throwing it out there, you're dropping that line tip down towards the water, getting as much of that line in the water so the wind's not blowing it off. And I think we boated like maybe 10 fish that Sunday. But you got to understand, for early to mid-December, that's not a bad fish number for the day. So
not at all.
Yeah, no monsters. They were 15 to 17 inch fish, but they were chunks. Definitely fattening up for the winter. Oddly enough, we did not one walleye, and there was an old guy in that used to live up here in West Virginia that his name was Dink, and he ran a campground. And anyways, he told me back in the day that when that water's choppy like that from the wind, he said that's the best time to go walleye fishing. So call it walleye chop, but no walleye. We just had smallmouth, which I'll take that.
Jerkbait wise, like what depth of water you're dealing with, and are you running shallow jerkbaits right now?
I was running Vision 110 Juniors, +1. They get down to like 9 feet. I'm not trying to jam it down to 9 feet, but giving it some good pulls, get it down closer to the bottom of the river, and just working them. And with jerk baits in the wintertime, the key is that they're not going to eat it when it's moving. they eat it when that thing is just sitting still and, just, dangling or, it's slowly drifting with whatever current there is. And, they eat it. They like them. It'll call them up off the bottom in some of those deep holes.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem this time of year. At least what I've seen. In the summertime, you can pretty much go to any section of the river and there might be a fish. This time, they do congregate. So you have to cover water slowly, so to speak, if you're not familiar with the river, to get to those holes, those eddies that they're staying in.
Yeah, definitely. It is a winter fishing can be a challenge, but the reward can be really great. I mean, that's winter times when I catch the majority of my citations is in the winter time. And, for one, that's because I get out to go out and fish a lot more for myself. But two, that's where those big ones, that's the chance that a true giant is that wintertime fishing, or that springtime, pre-spawn is the other, shot at a big giant.
The nice thing about this time of year too is you're going to have the place to yourself. And honestly, the conditions are more stable. Like the problem I have with the spring, and I'm the only guy that has this issue, is it's harder to predict the weather. It's going to be, you're going to have those massive spring gusts, the rain, but from October to December, it's just getting colder. Every now and then the weather will have a temper tantrum, but you can bet on the weather you're going to get the next day.
Yeah. But, speaking on that note, Thomas, I got to say, you can't, in the springtime, you cannot be a fair weather fisherman, right? You have to go out no matter what the wind's going to be, no matter what if it's raining, cold. I mean, I had mine out last spring, mid to late April, and it was go time. I do not cancel any trips in the spring unless it's like gusty winds, because you can't afford at that time of the year. You can't afford to like take a day off, because we'll have days where, I had clients in the boat this past spring, and we had 5 sight in one day, and missed probably just as many chances at another 5 citations that, break off. Whatever. Usually they break off because we're fishing in and around rocks and stuff. But it was an amazing day. I mean, I probably ruined these guys with those, 5 citation smallmouth in the boat, 20 inches or bigger. I mean, they were all 20 inches or bigger. And, that's a pretty big day.
With all your experiences on the water, have you seen the fish react differently to a blustery, windy day in the middle of winter compared to a blustery, windy day in the middle of the spring, the summer? Or do they act the same way no matter what?
What'll happen is that they'll in the wintertime, I mean, anytime, if you get a blustery, wintry day, it will definitely, or blustery, windy day, it can definitely change the where they're at. I think in the spring, maybe not as much, because in the spring, I mean, they're riled up, man. You get into that pre-spawn, and it's like nothing can stop them. They're going to do what they're going to do as long as that water temperature is what it should be. It's not going to stop them. So, but definitely wintertime, can make it a little tougher. They will move around. It depends on, at times too, it depends on, if bait are being pushed up into, spots due to wind, that can definitely, change where they're at. And, I've seen in wintertime, and again, back to these like low water conditions, low and clear water, smallmouth moving. And I've said this before on one of our podcasts, but smallmouth moving upstream in shallow water, relatively shallow water. And, my idea is they're moving from hole to hole, or out and about, just to forage, a bit and not trying to maybe, consume so much in that deep hole that they've been in. Or maybe they're just going out to go visit their friends or something up in the next deep hole upstream.
That makes sense. I mean, that's the one thing that's been fun about doing this show for 3 years now is talking to so many river guys over so many different rivers, and they all come to the conclusion that these fish travel a shit distance, like a shit ton of distance between spring, summer, fall, winter. It's not like this is my hole and I stay it indefinitely. They will go all the way up 10, 20 miles, all the way down. If there's no food or the cover's not right, they're gone.
Yep.
They'll leave.
Yep, definitely. I mean, we had a fish in the spring that had been tagged, and it had been tagged and moved from. It had been tagged below Heater Island on the Potomac, and had moved 16 miles upriver in 6 months through the wintertime.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow. Because, honestly, that's a big stretch of river, too. Let's say you're fishing from Riverton all the way to the Millville Dam. That is 20 miles, 30 miles of river?
Well,
15?
It's probably more like 30.
30? Damn.
Yeah.
That's a big distance they can move up and down to find exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah, but pretty amazing just to know, this fish had been tagged here, but from when I talked to the guy who had tagged it, that it had been other fish that had been tagged had moved maybe 500 yards from where they'd been tagged in 6 months.
Wow. So
that just goes to show you, bass, I don't think there's any rhyme or reason, as to why some of them move and some of them don't.
At what size do you think, if at ever, they start picking out an area that this is going to be their main ambush point? I know largemouth and spots and smallmouth are all different in how they do everything. And I've always been curious, when it reaches an 8 to 10-year-old smallmouth, 20 plus inches, it's the big dog.
Yeah.
It's got its pick of cover.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that fish is more inclined to have a home range? It's going to pick the nastiest thing and just stay there?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe, big fish like that, he's picked out his own beat, he's going to, that's his area. Fish come out of the river. I mean, I've seen the same fish caught out of spots that, it's almost like, clockwork year after year that they'll be there.
Mm.
So
that's crazy, because I've always wondered, when you spook one, whether you're in a jet boat, you're floating, or a kayak, how long does that one until it comes back? And I think it was Jeff Little talked about this. His hypothesis is this: a big smallmouth probably has 3 ambush points in a section, and it'll rotate between the 3. So it's like, if you spook him, he's not gone forever. In theory, in the day, he's going to work his way back to where he was.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that makes complete sense. And I mean, if Jeff Little said it, I believe it. The man is a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah. And I think that's where, the Shenandoah is a tough river, but I finally, I don't know how I could run the show or not, but I finally went to the Susky, and I was like, good God, this thing is wide. I can totally see you can fish this thing left to right. You the Shenandoah in most parts, in theory, you could sit dead nuts in the middle and make casts. It's insane. You can't do that there.
No, my goodness, man. Like that river, at points, is like a mile wide.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of ground to cover, just left to right. I mean, you just kind of, I don't know how some of those Susquehanna guides do it, but I mean, like Jeff, Gorsuch, he, I'm sure he's got spots that, he visits the same spots, and I'm sure he's got spots, that he goes to year after year after year, different times through the season, different spots through the season, that he knows where the fish are and what their activities will be. And mean, that's part of, being a guide too, is that you just learn a body of water. And, yeah, I mean, I've more than once, I've told a client, make a cast over there by that rock. And sure enough, I mean, they get bit and eaten, because fish are always there at this specific time of the year. And sometimes it's the same fish, year after year. And, those are those guide moments that you love, when you give somebody a direction to make a cast to, and they come out on top. And, I mean, it happened, last year. It was, late November, early December. And I had a client out from Chicago and had, multiple guide moments in that day. And, it made a believer of him. So
It's probably interesting with spots and stuff. With the Shenandoah having its three distinct, I think you have the north, the south fork, and then the main stem. In the wintertime, do they all fish the same, or it's different? Like the North Fork is generally shallower than the others. And do the fish just shut off if it's too shallow and too cold compared to the North or the South?
no, I mean, I think it's all the same. And I mean, I fish the Shenandoah just like I fish the Potomac, for wintertime. I mean, I just find those deep holes. And there's places that, it's deep, and you may look at it and say, man, the current's moving too fast through there. But those fish are hanging out generally down at the bottom, or maybe on the side of a bank, somewhere where they can just get out of the current. And if there's some big boulders down there, and if it's deep, on really either river, and has that current, you can almost guarantee there's some big boulders down there. And you just kind of gotta find where they're at, and just run through. And the thing about winter fishing, you can make multiple casts to the same spot in the wintertime if you're fishing deep. When the rest of the year, you want to, vary your casts. And I always tell folks, we kind of do like a fan casting. So you'll make a cast upstream, run it through. Then your next cast will be a couple feet downstream, run your bait through, and just keep on working around, like a fan. And whereas in the wintertime, you can run it through the same area multiple times, because if you come up with a fish, there's probably more fish down there. So that there's more, and we just sit and kind of fish those holes. Sometimes we fish them out till nobody wants to eat anything that, comes down there, because they're all, hook shy, now, because, they watch so many of their buddies,
Yep.
yanked out of the water, and then at that moment you just move on to the next deep hole, and just work it all over again.
When you and I went out a little while ago, we were fishing rock, and then mysteriously, then we started to catch them off of wood.
Yeah.
Is there a rhyme and reason to when they pick wood versus rock? Is it a heat thing with the sun?
I mean, it could be. I could see maybe if a branch was, part of the tree was sticking up out of the water, maybe it might, change the temp some. But I tell you, I've learned, or not learned, but this year, lots of times I see a log in the river, and it's like, I know there's a fish on that log. And sure enough, there's a fish on it. We might be just kind of pushing through an area. And, sometimes those logs, if you don't remember exactly where they're at, you can kind of run up on them out of nowhere. And it's like, oh man, there was that log. Oh, there's that big smallmouth that's been hanging out, around that log. But yeah, I can't say if there's any rhyme or reason. I mean, rock's going to heat up too, in the wintertime. Yeah. If you've got exposed rock, and from what I understand, the deeper you go, the more steadier and actually warmer, from what I understand, the water temp is, and the definitely more steady temperature it is, and not so fluctuating. So But yeah, that was odd that day. It was like, all right, we were catching them on rocks, and then now we're like catching them off of wood. But some of it, I think, too, was that stretch that we were on.
True.
Because we get down towards the end of that, and it's deep. There's not a ton of rocky bottom to it, but the fish are just holding close to timber or something like that, so that they can have some place to either be protected or possibly ambush.
Best available cover, basically.
Yeah. Yep. And you can't write that stuff off. I mean, if you see a log in the river, fish it. No matter what time of year it is, throw something at it.
How have you seen any muskie or walleye start to enter the zeitgeist? Have you seen a lot of follows? Have you had an uptick in clients wanting a guided trip specifically to target them yet?
Yeah, I've had some folks reach out about specifically wanting to fish for walleye. And I've had them reach out for muskie. I by no means am a muskie man. The muskie that I've had in the boat, a handful, not a ton, have gotten bit off by muskie on, more than one occasion. Had muskie follow into the boat as well. But that is a rabbit hole in itself to go down that muskie hole. So, I mean, it is, you have to be dedicated to musky fish, and you have to be in a right mindset to do it. And from what I understand, and I can say from my own research of when I have had muskie in the boat, I look back, moon phases really play a big part of it. Full moons, new moons, couple days before, couple days after, all kind of, help. And what's helped to seal that deal is times that I have gone muskie fishing in spots where it's well known for muskie, and everybody and their brothers out there doing the same thing, throwing for muskie. And so it's like, okay, well, this confirms it for me a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, and there's plenty of walleye in both rivers.
Really?
Muskie as well. I think with the muskie though, you're better off trying to go to some spots that are maybe well-known muskie spots.
So the muskie are very section oriented. It's not like the whole river's got them.
Right.
Gotcha.
Well, they have to have everything just right. The right cover, stuff like that. Some depth, and being an apex predator like that. I mean, those guys can sit in any hole that they choose, and just take pick of whatever they want to eat. So.
I'm glad you mentioned the walleye thing, because I do believe I've caught them at Dam 4. I've caught them at Dam 3 on the upper Potomac. I mean, yeah. I saw them when I was out with you. I feel like they are in every stretch of that river, and they're doing just fine, because you can catch them anywhere. and
before, previous podcasts, you had mentioned, like, would we ever see, some big walleye? I mean, or something along those lines. I mean, or 30-inch plus, walleye. I mean, they're there. I have no doubts, man, that big walleye are out there.
And what's crazy is I talked to Halleck or some point. My mind's all fuzz with how many people I've talked to, but they took the genes from the New River population and moved that to the Shenandoah. So it's not like the runts. They put the big brawlers in there. And
nice.
I do think we're going to see one of those pop off here shortly. And I think that's cool, because right now it doesn't look like it's affecting the smallmouth at all, but they're willing to bite when nothing else will. Yeah.
I mean, that's the only one that I'll harvest from the river to bring home.
So good.
The walleye. Man, I had brought one home from the Potomac the other day, and cut some fillets, and like up by the gills, man. I mean, I had that much meat up by the gills, and I filleted it out, and cut it up into nuggets, dredged it, and made fish tacos out of it, and they were delicious.
When you're fishing the Potomac, because you have the raft, are you fishing around the Harpers Ferry area? Because that seems very rugged. Well, now I'm talking about from the Potomac side of things, like through that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. From the old Dam 3 down, which goes down through the Needles, right past Harpers Ferry, generally all the way down to Brunswick. But wintertime, I shorten my trips because we have less, daylight, and usually we're sitting in holes and just fishing. And there's quite a few pretty deep holes on that stretch. It's been a tried and true winter stretch.
Oh yeah.
So it's real nice to be able to float that. Problem is that taking out at the halfway point, it's with a raft.
Gotta be a chore.
Well, and you got to know somebody. I'll say that.
Yeah, because that's a hell of a float if you try to do the whole thing.
Yes.
If you're launching from Dargan.
Yeah, and I mean it's from further downstream from Dargan. They're just right above the dam. On that, it's called the Harpers Ferry Campground. There's a put in. You have to pay to get put in and stuff, and it works out. I mean, it's a tried and true stretch, and that's the Mark Kovach stretch is what we call it, because that has been his staple for so very long. And he, I'm telling you, that guy and John Hayes, they know every freaking rock in that river. They can tell you all kinds of stories about where big fish came out of, and some of the early adventures. And Kovach started guiding that, I think, in like the late 80s.
I gotta get you three on. I think I nagged him a little bit earlier in the year. I gotta circle back to that and get all three of you guys in person at Jake's and just tell some stories about that, because that place has changed so much over the years. That whole section. Yep.
And those guys are like the old guard. I mean, they've been around for a while, and they've seen. I mean, they tell you about all the droughts and all the issues, all the rainy seasons that they've gone through, where they were scrambling to try and find other better water to take trips out on, because if they didn't, they weren't doing any trips, because the water was bad. And they've known a lot of those guys. Butch Ward, who was a guy from up around Shepherdstown.
Well,
you know who I'm talking about?
Because you think this is funny. That is my wife's sister's brother.
Really?
I shit you not. I didn't know that until her grandfather passed away, and at the funeral, this person that ran the Antietam Bass Club said, like, I have some magazines of his. You might want them. I was like, holy shit.
Oh, yeah, man. Heck yeah. He was like, from what I understand, like there was not enough credit given to that guy for, some of his working on the Potomac and fishing. I'm fortunate. I have a Butch Ward hair jig.
Yeah.
One that he had actually tied, that was given to me by John Hayes. But those guys all, they all knew each other and stuff, and fished with each other, and good buddies and stuff. So
it's crazy
that's something you could do a podcast on.
Oh, dude, I would love to get some of those old guards to tell stories about that. Yeah. I mean, from what I've learned is because the president of the Antietam Bass Club that I'm a part of, he runs the Butch Ward tournament now, because apparently it used to be on the Susquehanna, the charity event he put on. Yeah. But allegedly, I don't know if this is all true, but a lot of the Susquehanna guides banded together to get weigh-in tournaments banned, and so he moved the tournament to the Upper Potomac on Big Slack, which is where it's held now. But he's still the tournament's still run. The foundation is still run to this day in his name, which is pretty incredible.
Nice. Yeah, that is very incredible. So, yeah, that would be to get that old guard in. I mean, you might have to dedicate 2 to 3 hours.
That'd be fun
to those guys, because they've got a lot of stories, and and stuff. And, they're a great crew. I'm glad that, they were able to, um, accept me and kind of take me under their wing, so to speak, and see my potential, over the years and stuff. So, we're all good friends. That's who I went down to the Outer Banks with to fish for false albacore with those guys.
Yeah.
So.
Tell that story again. I know we talked about it offline, but that's different, isn't it?
It is, man. That was my first real taste of some saltwater fishing, and man, those false albacore. I mean, they're freaking torpedoes. I mean, they're a tuna, and they've got that tuna tail and just speeding bullets in the water. I mean, so that was a nice getaway trip with a bunch of really good guys, and lots of good food, and tasty beverages in the evenings, and fish talking, and the smell of salt air and all that stuff. And a new thing for me to go out and when you river fish all the time, and you look and you see a rock or a log, and you're like, yeah, that's where I'm making my cast. And you get out there, and it's just like,
yeah.
Where do you cast? And it's like striper fishing. You're watching for birds, watching for bait fish, watching for fish, the boils and stuff out on the water. So you're constantly scanning, and you're also, I mean, it can be like combat fishing, because there's another 12 boats out there, and they're all doing the same thing that you're doing, watching for birds and whatnot. And you see one speed off, and you look off into the distance, and you're like, oh man, they must have saw something. And you go speeding off, but yeah, great fun. I'd made it a rule that I would get 3 false albacore on spinning tackle, and from that point I would switch over to fly rod. And I got 3. By day 2 I had 3. It wasn't the greatest albie fishing, and especially hearing from these guys, water temps were a bit on the warm side, a little too warm for the albies. And so, but we had fish, and so the rest of the time I dedicated to the fly rod and had multiple shots at glory. But the thing is, with those albies, they eat, and you don't set the hook. They just eat, and they run, and they hook themselves. And I was hook setting with fly rod. I mean, because some of them were really close to the boat. The potential eats, and when I should have just left the bait, my fly sit there. But great fun. I mean, I'd do it all over again.
How were you targeting them with a fly? Is this with a topwater streamer? Do you put live bait on the fly rod? How does that work?
It depends. Sometimes sinking lines, sometimes intermediate lines, which is a line that doesn't sink very fast or very deep, and then topwater lines. And I eventually figured out, because we were throwing on spinning tackle something called an albie snack, which is basically a really big fluke, soft plastic, fluke or jerk shad or something like that. And those unweighted kind of barely go under the surface of the water, and a lot of times skip across the top of the water as you're working them back to the boat. And so I was like, all right, let me put on a crease fly, which is just basically a piece of foam that's been bent over, glued. Looks kind of like a bait fish on the surface. And that was what I had the most potential success with, was that particular fly. But that was a floating fly. That one was meant to be on the surface. The rest of them, are streamers that you're throwing, kind of specific colors, whites and pinks and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of fun though.
You need to do that more often, because that is such a cool breath of fresh air to learn a new fish, a new skill. And yeah, that's something I want to do more of, is just saltwater fishing, especially now that the bay and this area has so many more species. It feels like there's more redfish and trout, and there's the cobia scene. Apparently, there's tarpon in certain ports of the bay certain times of year. Like that's insane. Like there's so many opportunities to catch fish.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to start targeting, like as a wish list item? Because now that you got albacore kind of checked off the list.
Oh, buddy, my bucket list fish would be rooster fish.
Oh, that'd be cool.
They're so cool looking. I watched, there's a video out called Running Down the Man. I came out like in the early 2000s or something like that. And it's these guys fly fishing from the beach for rooster fish. And it's a great video, but it just looks like so much fun. And I've got a good friend that I've had out in the boat. He lives down in Arizona and fishes the Sea of Cortez a good bit. And he's invited me down. He's like, "Oh, we've got rooster fish, buddy." He's like, "Come on down." So got a place for me to stay. I just need to get a plane ticket and find some time.
Dude, yeah, you got to make that happen.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier that I really wanted to circle back to was the butch word and the hair jig and, old tubes, things like that. And we're talking about these Japanese, dialed in computer chip jerk baits. Are those old baits still, how relevant are they with I don't even say new technology, but like we all throw these $30 jerk baits or a $50 chatterbait, but the old guard I talk to all the time still talk about the tube, still talk about the hair jig.
Yeah, dude. I mean, you can't go wrong with tubes. Those old baits still are valid to fish with. I will say that there's been times throughout the season where you throw a bait, and it's, especially if it's like, the new thing. And, I think eventually fish just get kind of used to it, or if it's a heavily pressured body of water. And I've found at times that if you change up the bait, show them something different, show them something new, they tend to hone in on it. And, it could be the next best thing. That cover scat, that's a big thing out on the Potomac. Friend of mine, Butch Murphy, had another guide. He had fish head guides out of Leesburg. He found those out, found them somewhere, and brought them out and started using them. And they were a big hit, and it seemed like the fish really wanted to eat them. The only problem with that bait is that it's delicate. I mean, it's like a Senko, a couple bites and it's done. You're hacking off pieces, trying to, glue it back together, just get a little bit more time out of the bait. But it's a different profile, maybe. I mean, it's similar to a tube, but sometimes you let those baits, run them out through current. If it's the season that they could potentially be out in that current, and just let that bait just kind of bounce down through the current. Do the same thing with the soft plastic Hellgrammites. But back to the whole baits, those old baits, yes, they are still valid. That, what is it? The Smithwick Rogue jerk bait, that's been around for 100 years, I mean, I've whacked some big fish on that thing. And, it's not, I mean, we all know that Mega Bass has set the bar, set the standard for jerk baits, but that thing still gets the job done.
Do you fish jerk baits more now than you did when you first started guiding? Like, do you feel like okay?
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine, fishing buddy that I go out with, Scotty. He came from the New River. He was a fishing guide on the New River. Moved up here. We met on social media. Comes to find out that, we have a bunch of, we know a lot of the same people. And so we started fishing together, and he talked about jerk baits. And I really didn't know much about the jerkbait game. And it was not something that I was comfortable giving to clients because it can be expensive. And so we ended up, we'd go out, he'd fish with the jerk bait. And he's like, snagged. And, when you got 3 treble hooks on those things, and, we're having to row over, and unhook things. And, I was just like, but he was like, buddy, he's like, you got to go down to the New River with him. And, it was like usually the weekend before Thanksgiving. New River's deep, very deep. And so we go down, and that's where I learned the jerkbait game and was on the New, and saw its potential for up here, and could take that knowledge that I had gathered and bring it back here and put it to some good use, on the Shenandoah and the Potomac.
What was it about the New? Was it the New itself that just lended itself more to jerkbait fishing, or just the people there telling you about it?
Well, I mean, the Susquehanna is like well known for jerkbait fishing too.
This is also true.
So I think it was just I didn't have anybody to expose me to it. I knew what jerkbaits were and I knew how they worked, but was not familiar with, especially with the wintertime game, as to those fish eat when that bait is sitting, not when it's moving, which is a tough thing for anybody that winter fishes for their first time. Is that, they want to move their baits too fast. Clients that I had out 2 weeks ago from Texas, that was the case. We were throwing tubes, and they couldn't quite feel. For one, the bite was very light, but when you're so in tune with that, to me the bite wasn't light. I mean, I could feel it. It definitely was not that, snatch that rod out of your hand kind of a slam, but I could definitely feel it. Those guys were having a hard time discerning between rock and bite. And I told them, I said, if you are even remotely think that it is a bite, set the hook. What's the worst case scenario? You get hung up on a rock, and if it's a hole that we're still trying to fish and spend some time in, we'll break it off and tie on a new one. But eventually they got into them. So
I agree with you 100%. Like, the one thing I learned is, when in doubt, whack, because it'll sometimes feel like it's a leaf that's almost on the end of your line, and you just have to. And the one thing that gave me confidence, honestly, at first was I just used a little bit heavier tackle. So I could just tell myself, like, if you set the hook and you snag, you could probably pull it loose, or you straighten out the hook, it's fine. And once I got confidence, I could go down to the lighter line, because I started to understand, like, okay, this is what it's going to feel like. It's like mushy.
Sometimes the bite is a mushy bite. Sometimes it is a, in the winter time, it'll jerk the rod out of your hand. And I find a lot of times with clients, especially if they're fishing something new, I can show them how to fish it a couple times, from running the oars, anchored up somewhere, have the guys look at me and show them. And then once they get the rods in their hands and they start fishing, I try to coach them along. But I find that, especially in the wintertime, it's better if I can stop for a minute and fish with them and let them watch me fish, and they get a better grasp on, what I'm doing, what I'm looking for, as to what their action needs to be, how slow they need to fish stuff. I tell them, let it marinate, move it slow. I mean, just move it slow and let it sit for a little bit and marinate. And, because sometimes those fish will come up and they'll swim around and they'll see it moving, and they'll, show some interest in it. And, you let it sit and they'll watch it a little bit more. And then they think, it's about time I need to eat that thing. So, and that's when the fun begins.
and exactly. And it can go feast or famine, but when you get into them, you can have a great day, and you catch. And the thing is, I think people need to understand is, in the summertime, you can go out there and you can catch 180 of them, and they're all 12 inches. Here, it's when you lean the wood on them, it's probably going to be a football. It just will. That, if you're an angler, is fun to stoke, that all the fish you're going to catch are going to have a belly on them. They're going to be that beautiful color. They also I think smallmouth in the wintertime just look prettier, I think, than any other time of year.
They do. They do. Yeah, it's I will say generally in the wintertime, we catch nothing under 15 inches. They're all 15 inches or bigger with potential for some really big, smallmouth. So it's a glorious time to be out there. If you get a bluebird sky and the sun's just beaming down and it's shining on those sycamore trees on the bank and everything's right. You're sitting in that hole. I mean, some magic can definitely happen, and it's a lot of fun. And like you said, I mean, generally you're not going to see that many people out.
No, you're not. You have the whole place to yourself, which is so cool.
Yeah. There's no tubers. There's generally no kayakers. None of the wrecked kayakers and stuff. I mean, so it's, you can have some really good moments and wildlife. I mean, we were on the Potomac last Sunday and came down past Harper's Ferry and lo and behold, on the rocks below Whitehorse Rapid, there's a pair of otters, high on the rocks. So that was pretty cool to see. I mean, not everybody gets to see, otters. And usually if you see them, they're in the water and all you see are those heads just bobbing up, way far away from you. And so pretty cool.
What wildlife's making the most comeback right now? I mean, eagles are almost like pigeons now. There's so many of them. Would it be otters that you're seeing more of than ever before?
I wouldn't say that I've been seeing otters more than ever before. I've seen more otters on the Shenandoah than I have on. Yeah, I mean, seasons come and go. Same way with the animals. They're there. Like I really, one of the highlights of spring is orioles. You get to see orioles, and that is like a real highlight. As a matter of fact, this past spring, I had a local couple from Charlestown out on the river, and we pulled over to eat lunch, and we were just, I didn't bring any tables and chairs. We just sat on some rocks and had lunch, and 30 feet away, we got to watch this oriole fly up into this bush, hunting for bugs or whatever, and just it was pretty cool. So those are always a good one, and I've gotten much better at noticing their calls and stuff when I'm out, so that you can watch for them. But yeah, that's the benefits of these trips is just about the fishing. It's about the camaraderie. It's about the flora and the fauna. I mean, I have to tell people all the time, just take a minute and look around you, because it's beautiful scenery.
Travis, we've covered so much today. Is there anything that we forgot to hit on?
No, but I want to say, anybody's looking to book a trip, they need to think about spring, April, May. Those are those 2 months, man, and all the way into June. I mean, it can be fabulous fishing. But yeah, no, I think we've touched on just about everything.
Yeah, and I'll definitely have you back on before we get into April, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can do a awesome throwback show. I'll get Hayes and everyone else. I'll figure out a way to get their numbers. I think that'd be a great in-person show just to shoot the shit and tell fish stories.
Yeah, I've got their numbers. We might have to make an exception for Mark Kovac. I mentioned it to him, and he was like, well, he lives in Silver Spring, so he's not, he's a little far away, and stuff like that. But it would be a great one to have to do and actually have those guys on site.
Yes.
And, feed them a couple drinks or something like that. And, so they've been doing it a long time, man. And I've learned ton from those guys. We always love to swap stories, and at this time of the year when we're not bumping into each other on the rivers, sometimes we're out fishing together, sometimes we just make a phone call and shoot the shit about what's going on and fishing and stuff like that. And John Hayes is always ready for an adventure, so I know I can always call him up if I need a fishing partner.
Well, guys, I'm not going to make any promises. I'm going to do my best to get them on because I've had Charlie Taylor on. I've had a bunch of local legends, Bob Petty, like these people. Yeah. I just want to get them on a show just to have that time capsule, just for them to tell their story.
Definitely, man. It needs to be recorded. That's the thing. It's, lots of knowledge gets lost.
Yes.
And I mean, it's just, poof, it's gone. And so.
No, we'll make it happen. But yeah, Travis, Kingfisher Guide Services, as always, guys, link in the episode description to everything that we talked about this evening. Please go book a trip with him. Get out on the legendary Shenandoah. It's back. It's beautiful. Check out a winter trip or potentially a spring trip if you don't feel like the winter chill is suits you. Like and subscribe to the channel, guys, and we'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.